I'm Jamie Seeker, and this is What It Takes. Each episode, I sit down with real business owners to talk about their journey, the wins, the challenges, and everything in between. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and today's guest is someone who's taken a big swing in the legal world, and it's paid off, not just in dollars, but in real impact. Jim Parrish is the founder of Parrish Law Firm based out of Northern Virginia, and for the past 20 years, he's been on a mission to fight for accident victims, especially in car and commercial trucking crashes. But what really stands out about Jim is how he's built his business. He doesn't charge a fee unless his client wins. And that's a bold business model for any industry, but especially law. Jim used to work inside the insurance companies as a defense attorney, and now he's flipped the script using everything that he's learned to go head to head with them on behalf of his clients. Since launching his firm in 2004, he's recovered over $60 million for Virginia injury victims and has led several community impact programs. He still finds time to teach and coach youth sports and serve on multiple nonprofit boards. So in this episode, we talk about what it takes to run a values-led business when your revenue depends on winning. So we're going to get into systems, growth, and how to protect your team from burnout when the stakes are this high. So let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you've built a firm that only gets paid if the client wins. That's kind of risky.
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, obviously we've heard of these types of payment with law, especially, but what mindset did it take to run your business that way?
Well, I will tell you honestly, I'm not a gambler in my personal life, but in business, I knew that I could pick out and select cases that I believe that we could win, and that would also make an impact on our clients' lives in a positive fashion. And so we started the firm when my wife was getting ready to have our first baby. So stepping out and my wife giving birth within, I think it was 2 weeks of the time that we opened the firm. It was definitely a little scary, but through a bunch of hard work and always, I always attribute a bit of it to luck. So some good luck helped. We've been able to achieve a great deal of success over the last 20 years.
Well, that's awesome. And it sounds like there's a lot more strategy involved as well. Yes, maybe a little bit of luck, but you're betting on yourself, so maybe not a betting man, but certainly betting on yourself and what you could do, but also that strategy behind the types of cases that you've chosen to represent and things like that. What kind of internal systems do you need to manage like multiple ongoing cases while keeping that client communication consistent?
So we use a lot of AI to help us manage things internally. We have a very robust procedural manual that we've developed over, the last 20 years. Candidly, a lot of it has happened over the last just few years, where we've learned the value of systems as we've continued to grow, because you can't do things by the seat of your pants when you have a team of, more than 10 people, sort of, unlike what you could do when it was just you and your wife. So systems play a big role in what we do. We monitor KPIs both internally and externally, and all of that has really led to the success that we've had.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you talked a little bit about the strategy as well for deciding which cases to take on, but which ones do you not take on? Like, which ones might be too risky?
Well, so in Virginia, we have a funky law known as contributory negligence. And that means that if there's an auto crash, and most of our practice is based on, automobile collisions, and if the injured person is 1% at fault in the crash, then by Virginia law, they're barred from any recovery. So most states use what's called comparative negligence. And so they'll say, if the injured party was 10% at fault, but the other party was 90% at fault, then the injured party's compensation would be reduced by 10%. But in Virginia, you could be catastrophically injured. And if you were 1% at fault, you get nothing. So when we are selecting cases, we have to do a pre-signing investigation in order to determine, is this a winnable claim? And so that's where you have to be really selective, especially in this state, because we're I think there are only three other states that use this very harsh law.
Yeah, I actually wasn't aware of that. That's got to be something. I think it seems like a lot more black and white then for decision making when it comes to who you choose and take on then. Do you find that it's easier because of the law, or do you think it's a lot harder?
I think it's easier, honestly, and especially coming from an insurance defense background, because when I started practicing almost 30 years ago, I was doing the defense work. And of course, I loved contributory negligence at that time because I could win a lot of cases just showing a little bit of fault, on the injured party. And so when I went out and started doing plaintiff's work, I just decided, look, we're going to be very selective about the cases that we take because, again, we don't get paid unless we win. And so you can't risk and risk and risk unless the stakes are extremely high. So sometimes if somebody is extremely, injured and you think there's some question as to who's at fault or if there's a defense to it, I still might take that case because I know how to leverage the extreme damage that somebody has suffered to make the insurance company get nervous enough, to hopefully settle with us.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask, how has your background for working on that side of things helped shape kind of your firm's strategy on how you approach them and all of your arguments and everything like that? What do you take with you from that experience to apply now in what you do?
Well, I think it's been really, really helpful for me as a lawyer and also for my clients because when I go into a case, I know exactly what the insurance companies are thinking. I actually grew up in an insurance family. My dad was an insurance executive for 50 years. My brother was an insurance executive, my uncle, and so on. And so I went, with the family business, so to speak, out of the gate. But then when I started doing plaintiff's work, I was kind of the black sheep of the family. But all that, you know, inside information, is really what helps me and helps guide the practice.
That's good. And you've got a lot of that knowledge to kind of help and train your team, I would imagine, as well. So, what's your approach to kind of hiring, bringing people on that can come on, but also like I'd imagine there's a huge amount of pressure involved. So still delivering that top tier service to them, but you kind of come with this background and experience and you know what you're expecting, but you're bringing and building a team on that may not have that. What is your approach to that?
Well, the other lawyer that works with me is also a former insurance defense lawyer. In fact, we started practicing together, about 30 years ago at the insurance firm. And then she went her way, I went my way, but then, we reconnected a few years ago. So we both have that background from the defense side as well as the plaintiff side.
Oh,
And we
that's great.
also, yeah, we also believe, a great deal in internal training. And so we will hold, internal seminars, for lack of a better term, where we give factual scenarios to our employees and ask them to spot issues. And then we'll talk about what the insurance company is likely thinking about that scenario so that, the employees who are handling these cases with us understand more about the entire personal injury system and how, we can best help our clients by using, information from both sides.
That's really good. And I'd imagine you guys, I mean, you kind of talked about strategy a bit, but I'd imagine there's a good process management system in a firm where one mistake can cost you tens and thousands of dollars, right? I mean, it's all contingent upon this one win. So what have you learned about managing that process internally?
Well, you have to be good with your calendar because the calendar in the legal world, you live and die by it. If you miss a deadline, you can commit malpractice. And so we have a lot of internal checking systems on, that calendar. I meet with my case managers. Most people probably refer to, case managers as paralegals, but we use a slightly different term. But we meet regularly, to go over every case that particular case manager, is handling. And we talk about deadlines. And then we also have to plan ahead because if you wait, you know, you're going to make a mistake. And so one thing I learned from the defense side was to always be the one ahead. You never want to be the one reacting. You want to be proactive, especially from, the plaintiff side. When I was doing the defense work all the time, I had plaintiff's lawyers calling me up that I knew were overworked. They weren't paying attention to the case, and they would ask for extensions for this and extensions for that. Sometimes they'd miss deadlines, and so I decided when I started doing plaintiff's work, that just wasn't going to be the case. We were going to be ahead of the curve and we wouldn't have anything to worry about.
And I think that's actually really good advice, whether you're in law or anything else, running a business, any kind of operation, is that, timelines matter, timeliness matters. And in your case, I mean, obviously, like you said, you miss a deadline, it could be malpractice. So it might not always be on the line, that drastic for everyone. But I think that's a really good skill, for people to focus on and learn and kind of put, especially when they're managing cases or things like that, projects where, you've got to be proactive in kind of pushing those timelines through. How do you maintain quality then and attention to detail when scaling your operations across different cities in Virginia, for example?
Well, you have to continuously hire ahead of the curve. You have to anticipate when you need, employees. And that's a little bit scary, from an owner standpoint, because if you hire someone before you truly have enough work to fill their plate, then the math says you're losing money. But, what you're doing is making sure that you have enough staff in place to handle the cases as they come in. Again, you don't want to be hiring when you're behind because then you're playing catch up. And one of the things that, I always teach when I was coaching, was be early, and that came from my dad, and he said, if you're 5 minutes early, you're 5 minutes late. So be early to everything. And that includes in business, that includes studying. My daughter's a senior at West Virginia University, and I'll call her frequently and say, hey, what are you doing? And she's like, well, I'm studying for a test. And I said, when's the test? And she says, oh, it's not till next Friday, and this might be on a Monday. And I smile to myself because I know that she's doing it the right way as opposed to cramming for it, which of course, anybody who's been through college knows that you do cram from time to time. But, she's certainly learned the lessons well.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And I think, you kind of made that point about KPIs earlier that you guys are watching those. And so I think there's probably a measurement to show that, yeah, theoretically, it looks like you're losing money if you hire too early. But I think that's very, very short-sighted. And maybe in the term you do, but I'm sure in the long term, or even not even the long term, I think even just like a open up, your perspective a little bit more, and you're probably actually a lot more efficient from a money and hiring standpoint, in that regard. Because I bet if you were to measure if you're too late to the hire, that you're also losing money in that regard. And so I think that's actually really good advice. And you do have to be a bit, privileged and kind of established and well off to be able to be that proactive and be able to afford, an earlier hiring. But it is also that perspective shift. And if you just look at the like a longer term than just that short term, it probably is going to pay off for you. But I also wanted to get to some of the community stuff because clearly you're community driven, from the Wild Summer Initiative to the
Hmm.
coat drive. Talk a little about those things and then like how those kinds of programs fit into your business model.
Well, I mean, as a business owner, of course, you're in it to make money, but you also realize that you're in a position where you can help people. And so we have taken on the philosophy that, we earn a good income for ourselves and for my family, but we also have that ability to help other, community members. And so, I was heavily involved in my son's high school football team, and I donated money so that they could have a walkout tunnel, so they could run through it before the games. We do the Wild Summer program. We've given away, I can't tell you how many bikes this summer, and so the kids come in with their parents, get the bike. And we snap some photos, and the smiles on all their faces, including the parents. It's priceless. And then with the coat drive, I think we handed out, I don't know, a few hundred coats, a year ago or so. And you just know that that means that somebody's life is going to be better. And so instead of being the guy who wants to take all the chips off the table and put them in his own pocket, we decided that we're going to leave some chips, to help out people that aren't as fortunate as us.
That's great. And I think it probably takes some businesses a while to get to that point. Some people really start with their community in mind as they're building their business. But how do you get to the point where you're kind of like, trigger points in your business, like, hey, I think we're ready to start doing this? Or was there a turning point or a moment where you're like, I think we really need to start giving back and leaving some of this aside for the community and for, people that are, around in our sphere of influence.
Well, I think, when you start, probably what you have most of is time, and so that's, where I would volunteer, serve on boards and things like that, because it wasn't a monetary contribution, it was a time contribution. Then as you grow and you get busier and get stretched in more directions, then you have the monetary ability, to help the community. And so we're heavy into our numbers. We know exactly what we have, we project out, and then we just look at it and say, hey, how much can we contribute, to this program? How much can we contribute to that program? For example, we established a scholarship program where we gave out, I think it was $1,000, to a person going into college. And then we said, you know what, we can do two of these. And so then we decided to do two of them. Hopefully next year we're going to do three. And so you just look at it and say, there's extra income here that doesn't need to go directly in our pockets, and we can make sure that we can help others.
I love that. Was there a turning point in your business when you kind of realized like, hey, I can do this kind of stuff. Like this is working. We're onto something, big here.
I can't tell you that there was a specific turning point, in that regard. But, as we continue to see people in need of assistance, and despite the fact that we live in a very affluent area in Northern Virginia, there's still a lot of folks that they don't have the same things, that we have, and some of my friends and so forth. And so it was just kind of a natural progression, and I think the coaching piece played into that because with competitive sports, you see kids from all different types of families and so forth, and I remember being at a softball tournament and I was coaching my daughter's team, and one of the girls had forgotten her cleats. And she wasn't from the most well-to-do family, and she was very nervous. And I said, look, let's get in the car and let's go to Dick's, let's pick up a pair of cleats. Took care of it, finished the tournament, and I think we won that one too.
That's awesome. But I think one of
Yeah.
the points that I'm kind of picking up on is, it doesn't really matter what point or what phase you're in your business growth journey. If you kind of have that mission or community feel in mind, you're going to find a way to make a difference, whether it's your time, or monetarily later on, if that's better, because you tend to have a lot less
Right.
time, the bigger you are. But I think that that's something that's really stuck with me, I think, for my life is if like you're faithful with a little, you're faithful with a lot, whether that's trusting in your word, whether it's trusting in monetarily, your time, whatever it is. And so if you really don't have much to give, but your time to volunteer somewhere in your community and you do that at the very beginning, it is going to carry out with you. So I kind of like that there wasn't some aha moment or some like pinpointed where, oh, that's where we started doing it. It was kind of like, no, I mean, we've always kind of done it. It looks different over the years, but if you're looking at creating kind of this mission-driven, community-driven business and make a difference within your sphere of influence, like we were talking about, you kind of just need to start from the beginning. It's just kind of ingrained in what you do. I love that. So we ask this question to all of our podcast guests because the title of our podcast is What It Takes, Business Owners Tell All, right? And so, in your own words, what does it take to sit in your seat, to be a business owner, to, make the decisions that you make, do the things that you do? What are things, whether it's attributes or, it could be all across the board. What is your take on that?
Well, it's a little bit cliche, but there's no excuse or exception to the rule that hard work is required. Unless you're fortunate to scratch off a ticket, and win a lot of money, then you have to work hard. As a business owner, one of the most valuable tools that I use is delegation. Because when you start a business, it's just you. And so you're doing everything from licking the stamps, to addressing the envelopes and making the copies. And it's sometimes a little bit difficult to separate from that mentality, but you have to be able to assign things to people, delegate tasks, and then trust that they're going to do the right thing, because you've trained them properly and that they're good people. So you have to also surround yourself with people like yourself. And that means somebody who carries the same values that you have. It just wouldn't work if you're a hardworking, trustworthy, honest person, and then you bring in somebody who lies and tries to cut corners. So you have to be selective, with your team and the people that are working with you, because they're going to be the face of your organization.
Yeah, that's really good. We always say our kind of internal philosophy is that we hire for the values and we
Hmm.
train for the skills. And so
Yeah.
we might have somebody that ticks every single box from a, resume standpoint of these are things that this person has done in their life. But then if you kind of flip that switch a little bit, is like, well, this is who this person is.
Hmm.
And these are things that they maybe haven't ever done, but they could absolutely do it because this is what they were shaped for. And so we really look at like kind of what you were saying is like people that are like-minded, share the same values as you. When everyone's on the same page, then you can kind of build up the rest of the team to, you know, follow any process or learn any
Yeah.
insider information, that you've got from insurance companies or things like that. So I think that's really great. I
Yeah.
love this conversation with Jim. If you're listening and you want to get in touch with the Parrish Law Firm, you've been in an accident, anything like that, Jim, where can people find you?
So you can find us on the web at theparishlawfirm.com. You can find us on Facebook. We have an active Facebook page for the Parrish Law Firm. You can find us on Instagram, Parrish Law Firm. I don't think there's a "the" on the front of the Instagram. It was probably taken or something. You can find me on LinkedIn under Jim Parrish. So, if you have a need with which we can help, reach out.
Absolutely. And we'll tag all the links in the show notes as well, including some of his community programs if you want to get involved. And if you
Yeah,
love this
please.
episode, yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like they happen and it sounds like they're different too, year to year. So whatever the new ones are, do you guys actually share those on your website as well? I was
We
gonna ask.
do.
Okay.
So the Wild Summer program is phasing out right now as the summer, is drawing to a close, and the coat drive is starting up. The scholarship programs, of course, will be, next spring. So visit the website, and if you are local to us, apply, and hopefully we can help you out.
Sounds good. And if you love this episode, don't forget to rate and share, especially with the business owner in your life who needs a reminder that doing the right thing is a strategy. So until next time, thanks for listening to What It Takes.
Thanks so much.
Would you or someone you know like to be featured on this podcast? Our applications are now open. Apply today at seekersolution.com and click on the podcast link to get started.